Hello, this is Steven Nojiri, and this is another Tada Genji tradition video. This is the next video in the espionage series that was requested by some of the viewers. So in the previous videos, again, big disclaimer, and then we had a Tada Genji video, then we had a Kusunoki video. Now we're going to continue on with some more Kusunoki stuff, but we're going to now we're going to start bringing things together more to giving you a bigger picture. And because some of the viewers had also asked about more quote-unquote ninja stuff, I'm also going to show how some of this overlaps with some famous ninja material from the Bansenjukai. So let's begin. So on the screen, let's look at some of the most important aspects. The fundamentally one of the most important aspects of Tada Genji espionage and Kusunoki Kaden is securing betrayals. Okay, so securing betrayals is a fundamental aspect. It's just required. Without securing betrayals, espionage fails. Simply put, you must get members of your enemy's group to betray the enemy, either to give you data or to at least do things that you need done in order to keep your conspiracy going. They may know that they're betraying. They may know that they're betrayers. They may not know they're betrayers. But you have to get people around your target to do things that you need them to do in order to get the outcome that you need. Fundamentally required. So when you're speaking of espionage, it isn't really against the enemy. I said this in an earlier video. You're not really going against the enemy directly, but rather you're directly manipulating those around the enemy. And so with that, let's introduce a very important concept to Kusunoki-ryu, to Tada Genji-ryu and Kusunoki-ryu. Kusunoki-ryu specifically, the Kaden has a lot of material on this. So the concept is kaichu. And if you look at your screen, you'll see it's originally written like this. The kanji means revolving loyalty, or the loyalty has revolved, right? So turning loyalty, revolving loyalty. This is the term for betrayer, someone who has betrayed their side. Again, they may know it may be purposeful, it might be without them realizing they've done it, but they are now doing what you want them to do. So now when you look at some of the shinobi manuals written later on, like the Bansenjukai, the exact same teaching exists, except instead of writing it as revolving loyalty, they write it as body worm or parasite. But it's the same teaching. It's just they've messed with the name. And actually, on that note, to be more direct, if you compare the Tada Genji 5 factors and the 6 secret teachings civil offensive, you'll see this reflected directly in the Bansenjukai Yonin chapter named body worm or the parasite. So if you have a Japanese copy of the Bansenjukai or you have an English translation copy, you can go to the Yonin, the first part of Yonin, and look for the body worm, the parasite chapter or section. And if you just read it and then you remember what I've showed you in the Tada Genji video, and if you read the civil offensive from the 6 secret teachings, you will say, oh yeah, this is the exact same thing. This is you're identifying people within the enemy rank that you can secure betrayals from, and it's fundamental. So basically, the art of the body worm is the same, or the art of the parasite. It's the same as the teaching of revolving loyalty or the turning loyalty. Same teaching. And honestly, if you guys are interested, the Yonin section of the Bansenjukai is basically Kusunoki-ryu. I mean, if you want to know what does Kusunoki-ryu teach in terms of espionage and spying and a lot of that stuff, not even espionage and spying. Remember, in Kusunoki-ryu, the entire system of Kusunoki-ryu is dedicated to guerrilla warfare. So it doesn't really conceive of itself as having like an espionage section. It just espionage and tactics like that are just fundamentally woven into the entire system. So if you want to know what does Kusunoki-ryu teach, then just read the Yonin section of the Bansenjukai. Read the chapter called The General's Knowledge, and then read the chapter called Yonin. Those two chapters, that's a lot. That's a lot of Kusunoki-ryu right there. So it appears honestly that a lot of the material for the Bansenshukai for the general's knowledge and the Yonin section is pretty much pulled from Kusunoki-ryu, to be honest. There, of course, there's some changes, there's some edits. It's not like it's pulled word for word, but substantially, the majority of the teachings seem to be pulled just straight from Kusunoki-ryu. And sometimes they change the names, like Revolving Loyalty gets turned into Parasite, but the techniques are the same. Of course, Kusunoki-ryu has a lot of teachings which do not appear in the Bansenshukai, but a lot of the specific techniques related to confusing the enemy, securing betrayals, sowing discord among enemy, etc., appear to be, like I said, lifted from Kusunoki-ryu and dropped into the Bansenshukai. And since we know the Bansenshukai is a ninja boom document, if we look at the Bansenshukai, you can go through the Bansenshukai and you can pretty much point to different sections, say that was taken from this school, that was taken from this school, that was taken from this document, that was taken from this document. So like a lot of people know that the end section with a lot of the tools, people are like, oh, that was taken from the Gunpo Jioshu, right? A lot of people know that. But now what a lot of people don't know is that a lot of the stuff in the beginning, in the general's knowledge and the Yonin section, a lot of that's just taken from Kusunoki-ryu. So like, for example, Kusunoki-ryu has an entire section on false letters. But you can sort of know what's in those teachings by reading the Bansenshukai. Read the Yonin section about the Bansenshukai and all the techniques about the false documents and false letters from there. Not just letters to disrupt the enemy generals, but false letters that you wear on yourself in case you get caught, like the Art of the Fire, the Firefly techniques, for example, Kusunoki-ryu. Like I said, much of the general's knowledge section is also seemingly taken from Kusunoki-ryu as well. So if you want to sort of get a jump on Kusunoki-ryu, just read the general's knowledge chapter of the Bansenshukai and read the Yonin sections of the Bansenshukai, and you will have a pretty good foundation about what is Kusunoki-ryu from those. Kusunoki's main goal, but let's cut back. Kusunoki's main goal is to disrupt the enemy so that the larger enemy force could be broken into smaller chunks, and smaller chunks could be dealt with by the smaller guerrilla forces. So remember, I said that earlier. If you are one sphere of power and your enemy is 20 spheres of power, you can't. A one sphere power force cannot defeat a 20 sphere power force. But if the one sphere can distract 19 spheres, then they can defeat one sphere. And repeat that over and over again until one defeated 20. The Tada Genji tradition follows these same patterns as well. As I've been saying, disrupt the enemy's ability to function, sow discord among the enemy, secure betrayals, break the enemy into smaller parts, destroy the unity, pick off smaller parts. Eventually the enemy is attacked in open battle, okay, after they are compromised. So you do this, and then you either eventually attack the enemy because the enemy is so weak and compromised you can now just take them out, or sometimes the enemy's own people take them down. You may actually be able to sow enough civil discord that your people on the inside, the people your Kaichu, have actually overthrown their leader, and so you can actually defeat your enemy that way. You could also defeat your enemy by getting your enemy's allies to turn on them. You've created discord between the enemy and their allies, and then the allies attack them and take them out. So you basically control the conditions of the engagement until you have the upper hand. You strike only as needed, and always let the other person do dirty work for you, right? If dirty work has to be done, always let it be someone else that has to do it. Now these techniques are not supposed to be separate entities. They're not meant they're not meant to be kept isolated from each other. All of these teachings, all of these techniques are meant to interweave and go into it sequentially with each other. So for example, there's a Kusunoki technique known as the plot for laborers. All right, and in this technique, you focus on sowing discord and fear into the hearts of the enemy's laborers. Not the soldiers, not the generals. This particular, while you have people, so the reason I'm saying this is, so here's the technique. The non-warriors who are supporting the enemy are the target of this. And this is done by, in summary, pretending that your force is far larger than it is, and by spreading false news of their relatives being worried for them, outside forces favoring your side, fake letters, basically manipulating the world around the laborers of the enemy to make it look like they're in a worse position than they are. This disinformation campaign is meant to weaken the resolve and increase the fear of the laborers on your enemy's side. This not only weakens the enemy because you're disrupting their infrastructure, right? But it also opens the door for people to be ripe for betrayal or for just AWOLing, absent without leave, just abandoning the enemy's side. Even if the enemy generals know that this is a scheme, they'll have a very hard time convincing the laborers that it's a scheme. The point of this is to sow discord. So, while you have some people that are finding betrayals among the enemy's retainers, and they're working with the enemy soldiers and the enemy generals, you also would be attacking psychologically and through disinformation campaigns. You would be attacking the infrastructure, the laborers, the people that are building the castles, the blacksmiths, the local merchants, etc., etc. You basically it's a disinformation campaign, a psychological warfare campaign on the non-combatants that are the supportive structure for the enemy army. You're not just going at, you see what I'm saying? So this technique of going after the laborers, this is not something that you would do by itself, obviously. You would do this in tandem with going after the combatants. So you see what I'm saying? So there's all of these techniques, and even within the technique, so within the technique for disrupting the laborers, now you disrupt the laborers, if you're lucky, and I say lucky, it's kind of a bad thing to say lucky, but you might even cause a riot, for example. So the whole point is you're disrupting the civil aspects of the army's infrastructure, and you're doing it with similar techniques. So you're having fake letters going back and forth, and misinformation going back and forth. Each one of those techniques has its own teaching, right? There's a teaching for fake letters, there's a teaching for propaganda, there's a teaching for this, a teaching for that. And you apply it sequentially against the laborers. You also apply them sequentially against the generals. You apply them sequentially against the guards. And so all of these teachings, so again, don't think of each one of these teachings as being, because sometimes people, they read the translations or they read the original, however, if you can read the original, or you have to read a translation, whichever. But a lot of times people read the individual sections and they say, oh, that looks so simple. But it's simple because it's just one tiny part of a sequence that then gets applied repeatedly to different populations. So as I was saying, this technique is obviously not meant to be done alone. It's a single method that is part of a larger campaign against the enemy. Also within this single part, we see the usage of scouts, manipulators, tacticians, etc., etc. Scouts keep a constant finger on the pulse of the laborers, reporting the changes of opinions and hopes and fears. The manipulators meet with people, pretending to have news and or letters from their families outside of the conflict zone. Propaganda becomes a key task for the manipulators. The tactician orchestrates the overall narrative of data coming in from the scouts, data going out via the manipulators. The wet works team may even burn down a few buildings as part of the growing narrative, and the laborers slowly begin to fear and distrust their own side. And this is actually an example of how Kusunoki Masashige beat Utsunomiya at the Shitenoji without firing a single shot. Utsunomiya knew that the growing discord among his laborers and among his retainers was the result of Kusunoki's tactics. He knew it. He knew that they were falling victim to psychological warfare. But he also realized that once distrust and fear had crept into the hearts of his forces, he could not undo it. He knew they were being played, but the fear had already took hold among all of his people, and he knew that he'd been beaten. Utsunomiya would have crushed Kusunoki in a direct fight, but Kusunoki, again, he had managed to take away the one thing that Utsunomiya needed, and that was his force's will to fight. Because his force was now gripped with fear, psychologically, just psychologically defeated. He retreated from Shitanoji because he knew that he'd lost. Kusunoki had defeated the hearts of his forces, and the battle was over, and a single arrow hadn't even been fired. If it seems like the same concepts are being repeated, it's because they are being repeated. Just as there are only so many ways to swing a sword, the fundamentals of espionage are only so many as well. While there are endless permutations of tactics and plots and schemes that can be dreamed up, in the end, the foundational principles and teachings are pretty much the same. The human mind is the way it is. Once you have a decent grasp on how it works and how it can be manipulated, the fundamentals remain the same. Greedy people respond to riches, lustful people respond to sex, fearful people crave safety, angry people want justice. How can you say this is a hard path? An army is made up of human beings. Those human beings are subject to cause and effect. They are subject to their mind, which is emotions and conceptual thinking. Manipulate their sensory data and their mental and emotional minds until they agree to do what you want them to do. Give them a task which disrupts your enemy's ability to function. Break the enemy down person by person. Cause the retainers to fight amongst themselves. Strike critical targets as needed when exposed from the Discord. And that is it for this video. As always, these videos are meant to be brief, and they are meant to inspire you or to give you a starting off point. The material in this video is copywritten by me, so please do not steal this material. Please do not take it. Please do not copy it. Again, I hope it inspires you. I hope that it sets you off on your own investigations and explorations.